2,500 clients, 75 dairy farms, 180 horse owners, 180 hobby farmers, 2,000 dog and cat owners, 12 employees, $1 million+ worth of debt, 6 kids. I look back and I think, holy hell. And you don't realise you're burying yourself in life. You know, it was just life. And I loved it. I'm not complaining about it at all. I completely loved being a mixed animal practitioner. But you don't realise you're also not taking care of yourself as much as you can. I then stumbled upon a book which changed my life. I learned how to wire my brain to be a lot more successful.
And what was the book, just for the listeners, in case they want to look it up as well?
It was called Quiet Leadership by David Rock, and it was about leadership. But his first chapter was about the brain and really how the brain works. I knew alcohol could cause liver cancer, but I didn't know it could cause other forms of cancer. So I looked up research into whether alcohol can increase the risk of melanoma, and I was astonished to learn that it could. Why is that? Because alcohol is metabolized by our livers into a chemical called acetaldehyde, and acetaldehyde increases the risk of all cancers, be it breast, lung, skin, liver, any form. And because my life depended on it, and I so loved my life, I had to give up drinking. I really enjoyed a beer after a hard day, or a red wine with a roast dinner, or a liqueur at night. It's a really hard thing to give up. I wasn't going to subject my body to immunotherapy, which has been a hard enough journey, and then say, well, okay, it's okay to have a drink when that can increase the risk of cancer. So I gave up alcohol. Now I'm really focused on my diet. So resistance training, doing the bike in the gym and walking, and then the meditation and yoga. I feel fabulous. I really do. I feel better than I have for 30 years.
Welcome back to Peak Performance Hacks, and I'm your host, Dr. Gan. Today I have Dr. Irwin, who is a veterinarian who's retired now after he sold his business, but he's an author, a speaker, as well as a coach, and he's essentially been through everything when it comes down to business. So he knows the industry back to front. And thanks for joining us today, Rod.
Pleasure, Gan. Thank you very much.
The first thing I would like to sort of start off with is we've had this discussion about, how you started as a vet by yourself, and then eventually had a realization that, you can't keep doing what you're doing, and it's not going to be something that you can do for a very long time. Maybe you can give us a little bit of a brief introduction to how you became a veterinarian, and also how the business side of things was for you when you were first starting.
Sure. Like most people in business, I had the formal training of being a vet, and then did my apprenticeship, being an assistant for quite some time, 9 years, I think. Then entered into a partnership with 2 other guys, and eventually when they were approaching retirement, bought them out. And for 20 years, I was sole owner of a busy veterinary clinic. And it's such a hard gig. When you're in it, you're really not aware of how difficult things are, because it is your life, and you assume that everything that you do is just part of normal life. I was working about 60-hour weeks in all weathers. I did both large animal and small animal work, so going out on farms, not often, but sometimes at midnight in pouring rain or frost, and then fronting up to work the next day at 8 o'clock in the morning. I had to pay big time for the partnership and then sole ownership, and we were also joint landlords of our clinic. And when it came to splitting up the clinic, my ex-partners still were landlords, and ultimately I had to buy the real estate as well. And it ended up owning a massive amount of debt, which was a strain as well. So we had the mental work of being a practitioner, being a vet, and doing a lot of animal care. 2,500 clients, 75 dairy farms, 180 horse owners, 180 hobby farmers, 2,000 dog and cat owners, 12 employees, $1 million+ worth of debt, 6 kids. So I look back and I think, holy hell. And you don't realise you're burying yourself in life. It was just life, and I loved it. And I'm not complaining about it at all. I completely loved being a mixed animal practitioner. But you don't realise that you're also not taking care of yourself as much as you can. And there's a side story to that. Ultimately, as you know, I developed the usual health warning, and was forced to look after myself. And I look back now at how I am mentally and physically and realize that I'm so much healthier now than I was back then. I wasn't aware of the very long-term corrosive effects of stress and busyness, for want of a better word. And I think it's addictive. I was addicted to work and to life. There was nowhere in there that said, well, you're also a person that can't devote yourself to 2,500 clients and all their animals and your family and your marriage and everything else that goes with it. Where are you in all of this? And I just wasn't in it. I didn't have to think about it. I think part of the reward for business for me was service, of making a profound difference to people's lives. And you think of vets making difference to the life of animals, of course we do. But the reward, and I'm sure you'd agree, in part, is the profound difference you make to other people's lives as well. As a doctor, you would inherently understand that. But for me, making a difference to farmers' lives, to animal owners' lives, seeing the joy that pets give their owners and the benefit that we provide to society are all intense rewards. And you also have family and family get-togethers. So that was what I was feeding on. But really, there wasn't enough care for myself. And I wonder, had I been living that life, I don't know I would have had the hours that I can now devote to looking after my health.
Yeah.
And I probably, having had the warning that I've had, I would have had to have stepped back in some way, employed another vet or given up some of the practice or made some other allowances. And if you'd said to me at the time, you're not looking after yourself, well, I said, well, look, I'm taking holidays and my wife and I go on walks every day with the dogs, and I did some meditation in that time, and I thought I was being fairly careful with my diet and enjoyed a drink, but not alcoholic in any shape or form. So I would have said I went to the gym occasionally. I'd have been doing a good job.
When do you think, Rod, obviously in that young journey, you sort of took over the practice, you were in there for 20 years. At what point did you feel that this was going to overtake you, like in terms of the stress levels and potentially even anxiety, because you got financial burden plus family life plus work life plus responsibility?
Yeah, 10 years in, I suffered from clinical anxiety because of everything you mentioned. Mainly the debt levels, I think, wore me down. We went through a really sticky patch where I had no business training at all. I was trained as a vet, and I learned the hard way. And when I sold the business, the partners walked out, and I had to do it by myself. And that was 2000, yeah. And the wheels fell off mentally at about 2008. So I suffered from a lot of clinical anxiety, insomnia, and burnout. And as you know, I then stumbled upon a book which changed my life, and I learned how to. And this isn't it sounds a trite phrase, but I learned how to wire my brain to be a lot more successful, better as a business owner and better as a veterinarian and as a person. It wasn't a question of that I wasn't bad at any of those things. I think I was probably, looking back, pretty good at them. But the stress was telling, and it was the ability to turn my anxiety into calmness and my fear of failure, business failure, and not being good enough as a vet or as a person into, I think, what I term courage now and confidence.
And what was the book, just for the listeners, in case they want to look it up as well?
It was called Quiet Leadership by David Rock, and it was about leadership. But his first chapter was about the brain and really how the brain works. And I learned two things from it, that we're not aware of it, but our brains are changing all the time. And I wasn't aware of it at the time. And a lot of listeners now would be aware of this term called neuroplasticity, but that is the scientific term for the ability and behavior of our brain that is changing all the time. Every microsecond, our brain is changing. We just aren't aware of it. And then secondly, and equally importantly, that there are strategies we can use to take control of that change. And I was reading this book on holiday. I realised, I was suffering from anxiety and insomnia, my wife and I went on holiday to England, and I chucked this book in my suitcase and I got it out, and my wife and her brother and sister-in-law, who were our companions, looking at me reading this business book thinking, why aren't you reading a novel? Here was this dire need to do something about the state I was in. And that book gave me 3 steps to begin to wire my brain to be in a better state. And then I did 5 years of research into neuroplasticity, positive psychology, meditation, a whole host of other medical and disciplines, and eventually came out with 12 keys. The first book gave me 3, and then the rest of my reading gave me another 9. And I now call them the 12 keys to wire your brain for success. And I applied that over the next 5 years. I was a lab rat, and everything I read, I applied to my life. And at the end of that, I came out a much more calm, more confident, courageous person. And everyone noticed it. My team said, we used to know you as you were and you are now, and you're really calm and confident. How did you do that? And in the end, I knew there was a story to tell, so I wrote the book. And the book is the story of the journey and of my findings, and also dressed it up as how other people use it. And the reason I wrote the book was I sensed other people out there would benefit from it, because I was in such a horrendous place and then came out of it in such a good place.
100%. I've read the book, and it's called Wired for Success.
Get Wired for Success.
Get Wired for Success. Yes, amazing book, and I think whoever's listening should get that book. It's very easy to read. It's a quick read, but it's got the principles and the pillars. And I think as I read it as well, I was thinking about all the struggles, because we've had that conversation that you've been through. It almost seems fitting, knowing you as a person and reading it, that you've obviously overcome quite a lot. So it's amazing.
Yeah, it's extraordinary to look back at the journey, but here we are.
Exactly. So would you say that you said you had clinical anxiety, and there was sort of a change in you and a shift in you, and then moving forward, did you feel that was it always at the background, or were you able to control it moving forward?
I think, and one of the keys is to wire your brain for success is that you can't change things instantly. It'd be too easy if we could. And one of the keys is practice. And it's not as though you can become a skilled meditator or a skilled in any discipline, whatever it is, on the instant. And so and I'm still learning, I learn every day. I've recently learned new skills actually in meditation. So you slowly look back at yourself and think, well, I was that person, and now I've got these skills, and I'm this person that's skilled up in these areas. So we all start off in our trade as being a doctor or a vet, and then with experience we become skilled at our profession or trade. And I look at these other skills of being able now to control my anxiety or fears as being more skilled as time goes on. And of course we still get, stress occurs. Stress is part of life, but you develop skills to be able to handle those things so much better.
Yeah. And you've gone through one of the biggest challenges you've recently had, I believe, in the last 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, last 4 years.
4 years, yeah. And maybe you can share a little bit of that journey of what you've been through, because I think when I first met you, you were, you're the same person now that you were when I first met you, but you've obviously, that has taken a big toll. Maybe you can share about what happened and your experience with that.
Sure. While I was still a vet, still practicing and still owning the business, I became aware of a lump in my shoulder muscles. And I went to the doctors and they said, don't worry, it's a sebaceous cyst. I said, great, fantastic. And being a vet, I knew what a sebaceous cyst was. And because it was behind my shoulder, I couldn't see it. And I said, sebaceous cysts have draining holes. Yep, I can see the drainage hole perfectly. So I was really content. And I went about my life for the next year, and slowly this cyst got bigger and bigger, and in the end it didn't feel right. And I was never aware of a drainage hole. So I went back and got a second opinion. Within a day I was referred to a surgeon because it was obvious it was not progressing well, and the surgeon had a look at it and said, look, we did a needle biopsy, and when they got the results back, I want you to go to a surgeon down in Melbourne who's a mentor of mine. I'll see if I can get an appointment for you. I said, okay, fine, yeah, still think it was a cyst. And she said, I can get you in tomorrow. It's opposite the Peter Mac Cancer Centre. Can you get down there? I said, well, this doesn't sound good. So my wife and I went down there, and he said, look, we really saw the oncologist. He said, look, we really need a full biopsy to find out what sort of tumour this is, because it is a tumour, Rod. And I said, great. So they did a biopsy the next day or a week later, and then a week after that I was sitting back in his office with the result, and he said, well, look, no way to sugar dress this, you got stage 4 melanoma, and it's like, you know, you're in a lift and the bottom floor sinks under you. And being a vet, I know how dangerous melanoma is. And I said, well, I haven't had any skin lesions. He said, well, a percentage of melanomas, they get resorbed by your system and you've had no warning of this, but it's now inside your body. And I said, great, not great. And he said, we're going to take it out and we're going to do a scan first to see where everything is. So I scanned, went under the knife, and that was probably the worst day of my life because I knew he had the results of the scan. And as you know, melanomas can go anywhere, liver, lungs, brain. And I'd had it for a year. And it's highly metastatic. It's highly likely to spread. And so I was wheeled into theatre, and here he comes out with his mask and masked up, ready to take me in and remove this lump on the theatre. And I said, well, how was the scan? He said, well, the good news is it hasn't spread anywhere. And I couldn't believe that. And my only words were, as my wife was outside, can I have a man hug? And he said, yeah, I'll give you a man hug. So I went in and had the lump out. And everything was great. And I then went on this numerical course of immunotherapy, which sends 80% of cancers into, you know, it has about an 80% success rate, which I, you know, grabbed with open arms. And not everyone does, but I did. For a year it was good. We had negative scan after negative scan, and I should say for the listeners, immunotherapy involves an infusion into your vein of an antibody that teaches your body to recognize the cancer cells. We were going well, and then a year later it came back in my liver and in my chest, just outside my aorta and airways. And so we then at the Peter Mac had radiotherapy. 2 weeks of radiotherapy, highly targeted, and then a scan 3 months later, great news, all gone, fabulous. The oncologist said sometimes the breakdown products can teach our body to fight the cancer. So I think this has happened in your case. Great.
Great news.
Kicked on, went on holidays, lived a normal life, except every month I was back at the Peter Mac for my regular infusion. Everything went well until January of this year when I popped up 3 new lesions in my liver. And so the immunotherapy wasn't working and everything else I was doing wasn't working. And so we're going to put you on an experimental drug. And I'm thinking this is the last shot, you know. We're on the experimental stuff that hasn't been trialled and we don't know whether it's going to work or not. I'm on a trial to see whether it works and what side effects. And I had to come off the immunotherapy and off my other stuff as well. And I thought at that stage it was pretty grim. And I thought I'm going to de-stress from my whole life. So I got out of all my business dealings and I did a bit of public speaking, stopped doing that. And I had to come off the treatment for 3 months before I started the experimental treatment because they wanted me to be drug-free. And at the end of that 3 months, they then said, experimental team, Peter Mac said, we're going to do another scan to make sure that the tumours, you know, to measure them now. Me thinking, well, they've probably got bigger because I haven't had any treatment. And a month later, in April of this year, I got a phone call from the head researcher to say, we've got a problem. And I'm thinking, okay, it's gone elsewhere, brain, you know, whatever. Yeah. We've got bad news. You can't go on the experimental drug. Right, head stinks. We can't find them. I'm thinking, isn't this good news? But she said, well, it's good news for you, but it's bad news for the experimental team. So I've had 3 scans since, and they're all clear. And my oncologist, the original guy I've had all the time, said, this is really, really good news because it really looks as though your body really has made an immunity to the melanoma. Now, for the listeners and viewers, the side story to this is that melanoma, amongst all tumours, doesn't want you to be stressed. It wants you to have very low levels of cortisone. And I'd done my own research at this, and in that 3-month interval between getting the tumours and going on the experimental drugs, I totally de-stressed. So part of this journey is learning how to totally de-stress. And I've learned a lot in the past 9 months in terms of stress and how to control that, and taken my initial teachings of Get Wired for Success and added another probably chapter to it.
What would you share would be because you did talk about meditation and also the experience that has led you to a place where you can't totally get rid of unhealthy stress, but you manage it. But what do you think the difference was in the last 9 months of how you de-stress further?
I think there's 3 big things. I'd break them down. Firstly, it sounds very self-obvious, but in order to control everything about ourselves, you have to be self-aware. And because my life depended on it, I taught myself to be aware of my stress, not just day by day, but, minute by minute, recognizing, for me, what personally were the symptoms of stress. And then and a lot of the times I'm not stressed. I'm, pretty zen guy. And then when I do get stressed over something, I do these 3 things. The first thing is to be completely relaxed in my muscles, just to let go. And I think we carry stress in our neck and shoulder muscles a lot, and to really let them go. And the second thing is to really do slow, deep breathing. When you are fully relaxed in a bodily sense and you're doing slow, deep breathing, it's really hard to be stressed. And then the third thing I do is to go to a mental place that I know calms me, a favourite holiday or memory or whatever it is, where we know we're not stressed, and bring up that memory. And I've got so skilled at that I can then reintroduce things that would have otherwise caused stress, say public speaking or doing business stuff or whatever. And if I get those warning signs, just de-stress. And to be quite honest, I would have found in the past, talking in this sort of environment of a podcast and being interviewed, I'd have got stressed, and 5 minutes beforehand I thought, right, get yourself right. And I just went into this zen state of being really calm and confident. So when I said rehearsal's part of it, this is a life journey of learning skills that one can use. And when your life depends on this, and when you know you have a cancer that isn't going to go away, and that cancer can come back at any stage, you become super skilled at learning to modify your life. So I think that's part of the journey. There's a lot of other stuff in that as well, because to make myself immune or give my body the best chance of fighting melanoma, I've had to do a lot of other lifestyle stuff as well.
Yeah.
We've talked about stress, which is being able to control my cortisol levels, but of course there's other environmental stuff that we can do as well. So I don't know whether we have time to talk about those, but
yeah, sure. We can chat a little bit about that, because we can't leave us hanging, Rod.
So when I got the diagnosis of melanoma, and my oncologist told me that melanoma of all diseases we can really have a profound effect on in terms of lifestyle, I reverse engineered everything. So I then went and did my own research. And of course, we know that smoking can cause other forms of cancer. But I was lucky. I've never smoked. So that was a tick. That was a no-brainer for me, but for some people it isn't. But another big one was alcohol. And obviously I wasn't alcoholic, but what I didn't know was I knew alcohol could cause liver cancer, but I didn't know it could cause other forms of cancer. So I looked up research into whether alcohol can increase the risk of melanoma, and I was astonished to learn that it could. Why is that? because alcohol is metabolized by our livers into a chemical called acetaldehyde, and acetaldehyde increases the risk of all cancers, be it breast, lung, skin, liver, any form. And because my life depended on it, and I so loved my life, I had to give up drinking, which I found probably I really enjoyed a beer after a hard day, or a red wine with a roast dinner, or a liqueur at night, or a wine at a restaurant with friends. And it was a really hard thing to give up. But I wasn't going to subject my body to immunotherapy, which has been a hard enough journey, and then say, well, okay, it's okay to have a drink when that can increase the risk of cancer. So I gave up alcohol, and then I really had a good diet, but I went into things like gut biome and worked out that to have a really good gut biome, my oncologist said lots of fiber rods. So I do things like eat fiber-rich diet. Any bread I eat is fiber-rich, whole grain bread, lots of fruit, high omega-3s like salmon, fish diet, a lot of nuts and things like that. So I was sort of doing that, but now I'm really focused on my diet.
Yeah.
Doing a lot of, we'd always walk. So the physical aspect, walking every day, 4K a day with our dogs, and that's out in the countryside. So doing a lot of mindfulness and meditation. The gym 4 days a week. I've just swung from 2 days resistance training and 2 days aerobic to 1 day resistance training, 3 days aerobic, because I'm getting muscly enough as it is, and I really wanted to concentrate on the aerobic side of things as well.
Yes.
So resistance training, doing the bike in the gym and walking, and then the meditation and yoga. So I feel fabulous. I really do. I feel better than I have for 30 years.
Amazing, Rod. And I think what you've described with all the lifestyle factors is something that most people should be doing on a daily basis, not only because you're trying to avoid or prevent getting cancer, but it's just something that generally I feel, I always tell people you're almost lubricating the body for what it needs. And I think the body really wants it, but we're so busy in our lives that we tend to forget that, that's not important until something bad happens.
I would have thought I was doing a pretty good job. And I really, because I'm semi-retired, it's been easy to step off that treadmill. And I'm absolutely sympathetic to the business owners out there doing the 60-hour weeks with the financial stress and the mortgage and balancing family, because I've been there. And we think we're doing a good job. And in some ways I was doing a good job, and not everyone gets this health warning and journey that I've been on, or necessarily needs to go down the path that I've been on. It's only with the wisdom of looking back can I say I'm doing such a better job now of looking after myself than I ever did. But because I always loved life as much as I have, and had such a wonderful life, in some ways such a rich life, and wanted to go on with it so dearly, that I've done this discipline of totally looking after myself and being able to be really healthy in all other aspects. And that's being able to give my body the best chance of beating melanoma. My oncologist says with melanoma, there's no remission, that we have these micro metastases within us that rest there waiting for a chance to take off. So you're on this tightrope, and every time you have a scan, you sit in front of the oncologist waiting room waiting for the result of the clear scan. But I've done everything I can to beat it, and am so far doing a pretty damn good job. One of my classmates as a vet had melanoma and then had it removed, and I think this was a primary in the skin. And then he went through a really personal traumatic stage 10 years later, and it came back and got him, went to his brain and died. He died from it. And I caught up with his widow at a reunion, and she told me about the effect that stress had on Peter. And so you can understand the journey and that I've been on, and the determination I have to keep it at bay. And because it's uniquely, exquisitely sensitive to stress, and it requires a healthy immune system, all these other factors we've talked about, the diet, the alcohol-free stuff, the yoga, the meditation, the exercise, are all aimed at giving me a super immune system that enables my body to fight the melanoma. so I can continue to love this life.
Yeah, definitely. And what happens? I have this part of this. One of the things we do on the show is that it's called walk the talk. So you're obviously a very Zen man. You're doing all the right things. What happens on
Yeah.
those days you're having cravings for a beer or a glass of wine, or even the days where you don't want to get up and go and exercise or go for that walk? How do you stay on track?
I think I'd say number one is visualization, having those goals in the future. My wife and I do a fair bit of travel, and we have to modify the travel now to fit in with monthly immunotherapy sessions. So we go for a week or so at a time. So that my family, I've got grandchildren now, so seeing my wife and our children and our grandchildren growing up, because our life is structured around walking first thing, I get up, shower, have a cold shower, which also is good for immunity, and get going on our path with the dogs. That gets me going each day. So it isn't difficult. There are days where, you get stressed, and it's the self-awareness of listening to your body, and then the deep muscle relaxation, the deep breathing, and then the visualization to those areas of stillness within our life that we can visit enables me to still have pursuits that would have otherwise caused stress but now don't.
Yeah.
I have to be pretty zen because my life depends on it.
Well, if you put it that way, I think there's no other way to look at it. But I have to say that what you mentioned about the deep breathing and the relaxing the muscles, I think that's a big thing. I think a lot of people don't realize when they're busy, when they're stressed, the initial response is to actually tighten all our muscles. So that's why we get a sore back, because we're actually in a state where we're so much in our heads that we're not even focused on how the body feels, and the body's actually quite tight because it thinks that we're in danger. And just doing that relaxing of muscles plus the deep breathing kind of just lets everything settle. And I really thought that was amazing that you shared that. And another point that I think was important was and I tried doing it as well, which I've never done in the past, but trying to live for the moments rather than thinking about, because when you're busy and you got 100 things going on at the same time, especially being a doctor myself, I'm always looking at like 10 steps ahead because I'm looking at all possibilities. And I forget about those moments, and it's a good practice to have. And I think that's thank you for sharing that as well.
I think what I haven't said enough of, I might have mentioned it briefly, is the mindfulness, which is what you're really talking about. And mindfulness is, a lot of people are confuse it with meditation, and we have meditation, mindfulness. In my mind, they're two separate things. And mindfulness to me is living in the present moment and focusing on that, and being able to say, well, okay, I can feel a moment of stress. So what do I need to do in this moment to relieve that stress, or just enjoying the moment as it is? Mindfulness, being present in the moment, is essential. We tend to dwell on the past, and the past is over, and there's not a lot we can do about it. We can do two things. We can enjoy the moment, or we can design a wonderful future. Yeah, the past is over, and being mindful, I think, is being relaxed and enjoying the present and visualizing a purposeful, wonderful, meaningful future. And I think when we do those things, we can take our mind off the things that are causing us stress, and the stress goes away rather than consume us and cause more stress. And I think I've only learned in the past 3 or 4 months to really fully get it in terms of, so as I said, this is a journey, and you can't go from being a super stressed 60-hour-a-week business person to being relaxed straight away. These are skills that have got to be learned, but you can learn them.
Yeah. And Rod, the last thing I'd like you to leave us with, and you've told us so many pearls, but would you like to leave sort of 5 things that the listeners of the viewers could leave with that would help them, especially coming from a chronically stressed person?
Okay, so the 5 things. I think diet's really critical, and that so much of our Western diet can be, and it's a very strong word, but self-abusive. when you go into these things and your life depends on it, things like fast food and so on, alcohol, diet's really important. Look after your diet is a big factor. The physical side of things is really important. So as we've mentioned, I do this walking every day that starts my day, but also getting to the gym and doing resistance training and aerobic training as well. Either one of mindfulness or meditation or both at the same time is really useful skill to learn to do de-stress. I do a bit of yoga because I've had it's another story, but a crushed sciatic nerve and, a spinal disc that's got 60 years of wear and tear on it. I do stretching exercises and I combine that with either mindfulness or meditation at the same time. So I do a bit of yoga. I think that probably wraps it up. Diet, mindfulness, meditation, physical exercise, the muscle relaxation, the deep breathing.
Yeah. So essentially all the basic pillars that, we often don't focus on. Yeah. I mean, I've been, no matter how good I try as well, I think, we all in the day-to-day living, I think we all go through it and we're just trying to balance it in a way that that makes sense. But I tend to, having conversations with people like yourself and the others that I've had, it's a constant reminder to let me know that, I need to actually focus on the most important thing.
Yeah. The other thing, the fifth then, is enjoyment, to really be present at the times when you're enjoying it. If you're having a weekend off or family times or whatever, the ability to turn off is being mindful, to be mindful of the fact that you are on a family time or you are with your partner or you are on holiday, and it's really important that you cherish this time and zone out from work. And I've been there, I've carried work to holidays and I look back and think big mistake.
Yeah.
We're only here for a certain period of time and it's a very precious time and you should cherish those precious times.
Yes. Well, Rod, thank you so much for coming on and taking time to come on and share your journey. And for all the listeners and viewers out there, I'll leave the details of Rod below. He's got an amazing book which we've mentioned, Get Wired for Success, and he's also a business coach, and he walks the talk because he's done it and he's been through everything. And thank you so much for being on here, Rod.
Absolute pleasure.
This wraps up this episode of Peak Performance Hacks. All the links and resources are in the video description or in the resource section, whether it is on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you're watching this on YouTube, please consider subscribing. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave us a review so that more people can discover our podcast and it could benefit them as well. Until I catch you next time, speak soon.